The So again, this is our fiscal year 25 budget briefing. We're going to just start with a quick overview of the budget process, and then we'll each share our budget priorities, and then hopefully at the end, we'll have time for questions and then go over some next steps together. So just a little bit of background. The state's annual budget process is something that we really, at the collaborative, encourage food system stakeholders to pay attention to. It's the largest piece of legislation that's passed every year. It's considered a must-pass piece of legislation, and because the budget funds different programs, we consider a moral document that states what our government considers important. So we want to make sure that the food system is robustly supported in that document. And just one final piece, because the budget has so many different programs from the food system to housing to various pieces, it does touch every single person in the Commonwealth. So this is from the Mass Budget and Policy Center. They're a wonderful resource. If you don't know them, I strongly recommend going to their website. This illustrates how the state budget is created. So in January, in the fall leading up to January, the governor and legislative leaders, they agree on a revenue estimate, and then state agencies talk about what their needs are with the governor's office, leading to the governor's budget being released in early January. Then the Ways and Means Committee holds hearing on that budget. Those have been across the state in recent years, which is wonderful. We just ended up wrapping those up last week. And then in mid-April, you see the House Ways and Means budget released. So around this time of year, especially in March and February, is a good time to be talking to your state representatives about what your budget priorities are and what you'd like to see them support. And then in a couple of weeks in April, we expect to see amendments filed to the budget. I think in recent years, there have been between 1,000 and 1,500 amendments filed in the House, which is quite a lot. And then they have a week to debate that, and then they pass that amended version at the end of the month. And then again, the same process happens in the Senate in May. You'll see the Senate Ways and Means Committee release their proposal in the early part of the month. The debate happened in the middle part of the month, and then the amended package passed towards the end of May. Once that process is wrapped up, what's called a conference committee is named. It is usually the chair and vice chair of Ways and Means from each chamber, along with a member of the minority party, the Republican Party from each chamber from their leadership, and they get together and resolve the differences between the House budgets. All of this is supposed to wrap up by June 30th, so it can be sent to the governor's desk for her signature. If she wants to, make some line item edits or vetoes, she has that power. And then by July 1st, we are supposed to have our final budget. I will say that in recent years, it has been a little bit late. So maybe this will wrap up in mid-July, but we usually see the budget process wrap up around this time. And so I think we've been doing these budget briefings for several years. So I think that folks know that we really believe in collaboration. It's in our name here at the Collaborative. And we really believe in the power of organizing together to continue to strengthen and grow the Massachusetts food system. So these are all of the advocates that are going to be presenting today. I'll let them introduce themselves as they do a wonderful job, but I just wanted to include this here so that when you receive the slides, you know who to reach out to and how to contact them. And I'm sure folks will put their emails in the chat as well. And so we just wanted to be really clear with our terms. So like, what is a food system? So we talk about the food system as everything that is included from food production all the way to food recovery and composting. So of course, producing food on farms, then processing it, distributing it, supporting retailers and markets and where you buy your food, and of course, being able to have enough purchasing power to buy a healthy, culturally appropriate diet for you and your family. And so we're just going to start out from the food production side of things and lead through the rest of the food system. So this is food production and food processing, and these are the Collaborative's priorities for the fiscal year 2025 budget. So just very briefly, I think folks know that we've been supporting the Healthy Incentives Program for several years now. If you have SNAP, you have HIP, which is extra money to spend on fruits and vegetables at local farmers markets. And in fiscal year 25, we're asking for $25 million. That is an increase to support the growing number of SNAP households that utilize the program. And we're also asking for $5.1 million in a fiscal year 2024 supplemental budget to ensure the program runs through the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. So making sure that it operates this spring. We have some other asks, including the Food Security Infrastructure Grant Program, which we're asking the legislature to match what was proposed in the governor's budget of $25 million. Continuing our food literacy campaign to support the school wellness coaching program at $250,000, and then supporting a third round of grant funding for the local food policy councils. And now moving into food distribution, I will pass it over to Lisa.
Great. Thanks, Becca. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Damon. I'm one of the co-directors at Massachusetts Farm to School. We're a co-facilitator of the Massachusetts Food for Massachusetts Kids Coalition, along with Food Corps of Massachusetts. So I'm here this morning to just give a few minutes on our budget priorities. So thanks, Becca and the collaborative, for allowing us all the opportunity to talk this morning. So we are supporting and prioritizing two budget requests in the fiscal year 25 budget. The first being continuing funding for the Mass Farm to School Fresh Grants program at $750,000 as a part of that food literacy line item that Becca referenced with the school wellness coaching. The Fresh Grant program is currently being administered by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education using one-time COVID relief funding from a few years ago set to run out. So we're looking for funding to support the continuation of those Fresh Grant programs. And the Fresh Grant is a statewide farm-to-school grant program for early ed and K-12 schools to increase access to local food and local food education in those programs. Our second budget request is also continue a current program being administered by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education for a local food incentive program in K-12 schools. We're asking the legislature to continue to support that program by requesting $2 million in funding. That also is corresponding to a proposed legislation in the Ways and Means Committee H3993. And this program, also administered by DESE, is providing some additional funds for K-12 schools to buy local products and serve them as part of their school meals programs. Currently, schools had been awarded just over $3 million to do so from the federal government and are actively supporting local food businesses here in the state and the region. And so we're looking for funding at the state level to continue that important program. Thanks, Becca. I'm happy to take any questions offline or in the chat or whenever is appropriate.
Awesome. I think we'll just save questions for the end. We are trying to have some time for questions. We'll see about how much it is. But thanks, Lisa. And then moving on to markets and retail. Unfortunately, Alexis Walls was called away at the last minute, so I'll just briefly talk about the Massachusetts Food Trust Program, which MPHA has been the lead advocate on for a while. The Food Trust Program provides financing, including loans and business assistance to healthy food retail, either new or expanding, in areas that lack grocery stores across the state. They're asking for a level fund of $300,000 to help with the administration of this program, which is a partnership between LEAF, the Franklin County CDC, and MDAR. And of course, this has had a number of impacts since 2018, including improved access to healthy food retail for more than 692,000 residents, 1,150 jobs, 89% hired from within the local area, and of course, leveraging many dollars both at the project level and the federal level. I'll pass it to Laura Sylvester to talk about the RTAs.
Thanks, Becca. Hi, everyone. Laura Sylvester. I'm the Public Policy Manager at the Food Bank of Western Mass. And we support pretty much every ask that's in this presentation, but I am going to talk, filling in for Alexis about the Regional Transit Authority funding. So there are 15 regional transit authorities in the state of Massachusetts, and then there's the MBTA. The funding traditionally has been pretty uneven. The MBTA gets the bulk of it, and the RTAs are left to share what's left. Last year in FY24, thanks to the Fair Share Amendment, aka the Millionaire's Tax, for the first time, funding for the RTAs was increased. In FY23, it was 94 million, and in FY24, it was 150 million. So that's a pretty big increase thanks to those extra revenues. So we are asking that that funding be made steady and stable. I see Rep. Blais on the call there. There's also a companion bill that she filed in the House to go along with this called the RTA Advancement Bill, and we're supporting that as well. But we really need to keep funding for the RTAs consistent and steady so that they can count on it. With the big increase that they got in this last year, they were able to increase workforce capacity, increase the frequency of routes, add new evening service to 3 service areas out here in Western Mass. Franklin County was one of those areas that never had weekend or evening services and now does. It's making a huge difference for residents of Franklin County. And they were also able to add Sunday service for 3 different RTAs. And then on the next slide, you can see these are the RTA service areas, all in the different pretty colors. And then you can just see in the graphic, it just goes into more detail about which RTAs were able to add more frequent service, more evening and weekend service. So it went from 0 out of 15 to 6 of 15 RTAs increased their service. 10 out of 15 were able to add increased evening service, and 12 out of 15 were able to add Sunday. So really, really important, especially for the rural parts of the state where there aren't a lot of options. The RTAs are a huge lifeline, and we really need to keep them funded.
Thanks, Laura. And now we're going to hear from Phil from CISA.
Hi, everybody. I'm Phil Corman. I'm the director at CISA, Community Involved in Sustaining Agriculture. I'm speaking on behalf of the 9 buy locals that are throughout the Commonwealth. And collectively, we basically are helping the 7,000 farms sell to 7 million people in the state. We cover pretty much every acre. I think CMAP is here with us today. And I think the next slide shows all of the buy locals so you can see them. And I can put in people have questions about your area. I can put in the chat more information. And all the nonprofits are a little bit different. We're independent, but we all work together. We converse at least once a month. And our ask is for $1 million. And the work that the buy locals do are they basically make it more possible for consumers to know what's locally grown in their area. We've been at it here for 30 years, and we're the longest running agricultural buy local in the country. And most of our groups also provide business technical assistance to farms, and we provide training. And we're very committed to making sure that locally grown food is available to more and more members of our community. We've been leaders in outreach on HIP, and along with the food bank in Western Mass out here in our area, we're as high as 8% of families on SNAP accessing their HIP benefits. And as we know, that's just really low. So we love to keep challenging the dollar amount that we need in that budget and fully support that. And we just engage the community in understanding what it is to be a farmer, opening up the doors to more people who would like to farm, even those who have been historically oppressed and not allowed those resources. So national research suggests that if you have an active buy local campaign in your region, that you see more robust sales, even when it's a downturn in the economy. And we also know that we've done some work showing what's the impact of people spending a little bit more of their food dollars on locally grown food. And basically, if everyone in the Commonwealth, every household just shifted, not spent more, but took $5 of their monthly food budget and shifted that to locally grown food, that would pump $80 million into the local economy, create over 1,800 jobs, and there'd be better health because a lot of that food would be produce with over 250 million servings of fresh local food. And we know that every dollar spent on local food generates 70% more for the local economy than a dollar spent at Walmart. So it's for all of those reasons that, we are clear and hoping that we do have success in the $1 million ask for the 9 buy locals in this budget. Thank you so much.
All right, and moving on to food consumption, we'll hear next from Project Bread.
Well, hi everyone. So I am going to talk to you about our Feed Kids campaign for School Meals for All. And so I'm sure most of us appreciate this, but I think I didn't totally emotionally appreciate the fact that once we pass a great piece of legislation like School Meals for All, that every year we do need to secure the funding. And so I know a lot of people said, hey, that happened, but because it is such a policy tied to the budget, we really need to make sure that we're securing funding each year. And one of our legislative champions, Representative Andy Vargas, kind of likened it to a new elected official. Sometimes their first term or two while they're getting reelected is when they're most vulnerable. Same thing with a policy like this. The legislator had such good press around this and really celebrated this program. So we're not concerned, but we are doing our due diligence. So our ask is to make sure that we have full funding for the school meals program. The reason that's a little bit vague is that we're waiting for the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to really say what is needed. But just for reference, last year in the budget, it was 171.5 million. And the governor, we're thrilled to say, proposed 170 million. So that's a great starting point. But we know that we're going to need more to make this program run for all of the next fiscal year. So we really hope that the legislature at least matches the governor's proposal and hopefully adds more to it. Just want to highlight some of the impacts we've seen since a lot of you may have heard from the campaign. We got updated numbers from October 2023, comparing that with before the pandemic, before schools were all doing universal, and that is an increase of 100,000 students eating each day. And so that's a big difference in the school meal program, really solving a lot of those barriers we saw in the program. And that's also increasing the revenue within the program, so allowing for school nutrition departments to hire more staff, to buy more local products, to work with local vendors. And so that really has a big impact on the program overall and how it operates. Just quickly flagging, we did some research with Tufts, and this was with old data, so likely the impact is even bigger. This program saves $152 million per year in healthcare cost, and up to $1,300 can be saved per student per household through this program. But really just want to reinforce on the next slide, just the impact of this program is really big in terms of there's that 100,000 again, and I think we should think about just a tremendous change that we've seen in school meals. But I love this image because it really is also about this is what school meals should be. This should be about nourishing kids during the school day, but also really teaching them to enjoy good food and come together and have that meal in the cafeteria without any shame, stigma, worry about cost, and just enjoy themselves, filling their bodies with good food and being children. So I used to show picture of Fenway when we first had an increase, and then Gillette Stadium. The impact now is actually those two added together. And so I thought, should I put both those pictures? Daily number of kids eating. But I really feel like this picture here, if anybody has anything that they remember about what I said, just remember this face and help us encourage your legislators to secure that funding for the next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Leon, and thanks for that moment of Friday joy. I'll pass it over to Kate next.
Thanks, Becca. Good morning, everyone. Great to be here with all of you advocates. I'm Kate Adams, she, her, hers pronouns, public policy manager at the Greater Boston Food Bank. And I'll be sharing a little bit about our top 2 budget priorities for this year, the Massachusetts Emergency Food Assistance Program and the Hunger Free Campus Initiative. Next slide, please. So MEFAP, or the Massachusetts Emergency Food Assistance Program, is funding in the state budget that the 4 food banks of Massachusetts use to purchase nourishing food that we distribute all across the state. So MEFAP is really feeding people facing food insecurity in every single city and town across the state. The food banks work with over 900 community food providers. So those are soup kitchens, food pantries, meal sites all across the state who are directly distributing food to folks. On average, food purchased through MEFAP accounts for almost a quarter of the food that all of these community food partners distribute. So really critical source of funding for the food banks to purchase this. In our last fiscal year, more than half of those MEFAP funds supported farmers, fisheries, food manufacturers, and producers in Massachusetts. So there's a real economic stimulus piece with this priority. And the vast majority of the food is exceeding or meeting rigorous nutritional standards. So here's just a little infographic of the produce breakdown within MEFAP. We do have a high budget ask this year. It's $47 million. We were really glad to see the governor increase that line item, $1 million in her budget proposal. But you know, the food banks are facing a significant increase in need, as many of you all are aware of across the state. So you know, it's really that high cost of living that's hitting people really hard. The Greater Boston Food Bank has doubled the amount of food we're getting out the door since before COVID, actually more than doubled. So we're really focused on meeting those immediate needs and making sure we have the resources to purchase enough food and keep all of those food pantries across the state stocked. I do have a snapshot of MEFAP vendors across the state that I'd love to share with you all. I'll throw that into the chat in a moment. But that's a little bit about MEFAP. And on to the next slide, please, Becca. So the Massachusetts Hunger Free Campus Initiative. The Greater Boston Food Bank, along with the Food Bank of Western Mass and the Massachusetts Law Reform Institute, are advancing this statewide coalition with 2 campaigns. The legislative campaign is to pass this bill, an act establishing the Hunger Free Campus Initiative. And we're also working on securing funding at $2 million for the initiative to fund it. So what the bill would do is provide a roadmap for the Department of Higher Ed to allow 2- and 4-year public colleges, community colleges, and minority serving institutions to invest in sustainable, impactful hunger relief programs on campus. Some of those that we've seen include funding for staff who can notify students when they're eligible to enroll in SNAP and WIC, take advantage of those federal benefits. Funding for awareness and anti-stigma campaigns. As we know, SNAP is really underutilized on campus, and there's such a stigma for students accessing emergency food at pantries and other sources. Implementing EBT or SNAP mini markets right on campus. We've seen those be really successful. Expanding meal sharing programs so students can donate unused meal swipes to other students who might need them, and leveraging existing resources with nearby food pantries. So these are all some projects that we've seen funded through previous rounds of funding through the initiative. Last year in the budget, we were so fortunate to be able to secure $1 million. We are going for $2 million this year. We just had an awesome briefing last week where we heard from students about how critical these funds are and what the challenges that they're facing on campus. We know that community college enrollment is way up thanks to the legislature and governor's investments in higher ed, expanding access, but we also know that so many of the needs are not being met, and we need to make sure that we're supporting our future workforce to take advantage of higher ed and complete their degrees and succeed. So that's a little bit about the Hunger Free Campus Initiative.
Thanks, Kate. I'll turn it over to Laura again.
Hi again, everyone, and thanks, Kate, for talking about the Hunger Free Campus Initiative and MEFAP, which of course we are right there with you on making those asks. So the Bridge to Prosperity Cliff Effect Pilot is newly named. This was an initiative that passed in the 2022 December Economic Development Bill. The cliff effect itself is the phenomenon where if you are working a low-wage job or multiple low-wage jobs and you are not making enough to live on, and so you qualify for SNAP or housing or transportation or other benefits, and you are offered a raise or a promotion at one of your jobs or a new job that pays more, and taking the increase in salary will make it so that you come up against the limit of your benefits and you would lose more in benefits than you would gain in salary. That's called the cliff effect. A lot of people understand what that is, but don't know the name for it. It impacts thousands of people across Massachusetts, millions of people across the country. It really, really impacts single parents and people of color, and just keeps people trapped in poverty and unable to advance, even when they are doing everything that society is asking them to do and really wanting to advance their careers. They just can't. It just doesn't make sense. So this is a huge problem. And our pilot addresses the problem by enrolling up to 100 people across the state in Greater Springfield, Greater Worcester, and Greater Boston areas in job training programs over 3 years. So they'll learn a job that will pay them a living wage. They'll get coaching. There'll be a cohort of support, and they'll get bridge payments each month to make up for any loss of benefits that they incur while they're going through this program and earning more money. At the end of the 3-year program, they will be eligible for up to a $10,000 bonus to use to whatever they see fit to do. So the state passed this pilot in 2022. We have been working really hard to put it together to get it ready to launch. They gave us $1 million for that first year, which is great. It really requires $1 million each year to run. And that doesn't even count the cost of the bridge payments. So we've been trying really hard to fundraise through grant programs and other things, but we are also asking for $100,000 in the FY25 budget so that the state continues to support this program. And we're really excited to move forward with it. And we also just had a briefing at the State House this past Tuesday. That was incredible, went really well. And when you hear from people who are directly impacted by this, who are really doing everything they can to get out of it, they just need a little bit of support. We really want Massachusetts to be a leader on this and to make it permanent once we prove that it works. So that is that. I'm happy to take questions afterwards as well.
Thanks again, Laura. And last but certainly not least, we'll turn it over to Pat Baker from Mass Law Reform Institute and Lena Zeibauer from La Collaborativa to talk about feeding our neighbors.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and thanks so much to Becca and everyone for hosting this. Lena, I know you're driving to New York. I don't know if you are able to chime in or want me to plow ahead.
If you go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, great. And I know your sound and driving. So keep your hands on the steering wheel and eyes on the road, but feel free to chime in if I miss anything. So the Feeding Our Neighbors campaign started about a year ago. We do have legislation that was filed by Senator DiDomenico, Rep. Cabral from New Bedford, Judith Garcia from Chelsea, and it did get a favorable report out of the Joint Committee on Children and Families in February. What it would do is restore state-funded SNAP food stamp benefits for legally present immigrants with various statuses, humanitarian statuses. We had this benefit from 1997-2002 after a federal welfare reform law cut benefits nationwide to legally present immigrants. It sunset in 2002 because of 9/11, a recession in the state, and a Republican governor at the time. With the COVID crisis, it was very clear that thousands of immigrants across the Commonwealth are not eligible for federal SNAP benefits because of the very unfortunate restrictions that have yet to be repealed in the federal law. We're working on that with Congresswoman Jayapal from Washington State and our delegation. But right now, and for many years, legally present immigrants have not been able to qualify. So we have the state-funded benefit. Next slide, Becca. So I want to give you good news and bad news. The good news is we succeeded in getting $6 million into a supplemental budget that was signed by the governor on December 4th that has been providing state-funded SNAP benefits to legally present immigrants who cannot get federal SNAP benefits. Who are they? They're immigrants with temporary protected status, with pending political asylum, with humanitarian parole from Venezuela, Colombia, Ukraine, not eligible for federal benefits. But the good news is if you are from Haiti or Cuba or Afghanistan, you can qualify. Same status, parole. But if you're from other countries, you can't. Very unfair, very inequitable. It also covers children who have special immigrant juvenile visas, victims of violence who have something called a U visa, DACA, dreamers, people with deferred action, alphabet soup of immigrant statuses. And it is a very cruel and punitive federal immigration policies that we're dealing with, and access to benefits. So we got the $6 million, which is great. We're now hearing it's going to run out this month. There may be no more benefits in May or partial benefits. The state opened the program on February 4th with benefits retroactive to December 4th, which is great. Currently in the slide, I apologize, it's not super up to date. Currently, there's about 34,000 immigrants in the state that are qualifying either for partial benefits because their kids, for example, are getting federal SNAP, or the whole family is relying on this benefit. And it is indeed about to sunset unless we can get $2.5 to $3 million in this one of the two supplemental budgets that's kicking around, that's been filed by the governor and is moving around in the State House right now. And we don't know if that's going to happen. So I wanted to prepare you for that crisis that's coming upon us. As Becca said earlier, you can't get HIP without SNAP. And so families will not only lose access to the core benefits to buy food in grocery stores, they will also lose access to the Healthy Incentives Program. Looking forward, if we can get beyond tomorrow, we're trying and hoping for about $20 million in the FY25 budget. The reason I'm vague about the numbers is we're still trying to scale this program and work with DTA to understand how many families, how many individuals are impacted. I do want to underscore that about 80% of new arrivals in Massachusetts are from Haiti or countries where they're eligible for federal benefits. So they should be fine and getting the federal SNAP. And many of the immigrants we're seeing are not in the shelter system, are in doubled up situations or with host families. And taking away this benefit means they literally have nothing to contribute to the food budgets of people they're living with. So it's a dire situation. There's also a lot of people who are employed in very low wage jobs. Gladys Vega spoke beautifully about the 6 workers who were killed on the Baltimore Bridge. They were workers from Central and South America, Mexico, again, with the kinds of temporary statuses that relegate people to a lot of these, low wage positions. So we need your help, not only in the FY25 budget, but also in the one of the FY24 subs. And I'm happy to talk with you if you have individual cases you want to understand what's happening to them, but also if you can help us contact your area legislature. This is unfortunately escalating because the program has been, not surprisingly, meeting an important need for the current immigrant community. Alina, I don't know if you, I know your sound audio is difficult while driving. Do you want to add anything? Okay. she's heading to New York for a work-related conference. This is what dedicated advocates do. So I don't know if she's online. So that's happy to answer questions once we get to the end.
Lena, I saw you unmute for a second. If you want to try again, if you're safe.
Yes, my sound is very poor. I'm sorry. I'm driving to my vehicle. Just wanted to make sure everybody understands how important this campaign is. This campaign is for folks that are having to choose between paying for rent or pay for food, for affordable food, and how important this is for immigrants that they not only have to battle with the accent or with the language limitations, but they also have to fight for the low wage that they're receiving, and as well, they just had this benefit, and out of the sudden it's being removed without having enough time for them to recover, for them to be able to save a little bit of money, or for them to transition to another opportunity. I also wanted to thank you, Becca, for giving us this opportunity to talk about our campaign.
Thank you, Lena. It was a little bit in and out, but I just kind of recapping just the critical importance of this benefit, and particularly for families who don't have a lot of resources, and it gives them some breathing space to be able to then pay their other expenses. A lot of the low-wage workers, people have lived in Massachusetts for years and in limbo with their immigration status, and also thanking Becca for the opportunity for La Collaborativa and the Feeding Our Neighbors campaign to be present today. Is that, I think, it was in and out, Lena. I'm sorry.
I think we'll let Lena drive, but I also thank you for taking the time. I know, and we want to make sure that you're safe traveling, of course, but the work that La Collaborativa does is so important. So just thank you for making the effort. And with that comes the end of our slide deck. So this is just, again, we will send these out. Please don't feel like you need to take these numbers down to the line items. But this is just a recap of all of the asks that we've all talked about today from every single organization here that we're calling the food security budget. I didn't include a total number here because we're still waiting on a couple of estimates for some of these programs, but if you do the math, it's, and I'm forgetting my exact numbers right now, of course, but it's less than 1% of the state's annual budget for this total amount. So we know that the state is in a fiscal climate that's a little bit different than some of the previous years as the federal monies from the pandemic start to come to an end, but each one of these programs has a really important impact, an economic multiplier, impacts on public health, on avoidable healthcare costs from hunger, and it's just really important to consider talking to your legislators about why you support these programs and the work that you all do in this Zoom right now to keep them going. So again, together, we make this work, and we can continue to build a sustainable, equitable, resilient, and connected local food system. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen finally and see if we have any questions. And for questions, I think if folks want to raise their hand, I know folks have been trying to go through the chat as the questions are coming in, but if you want to raise your hand, that would be great so we can see you if your question hasn't been answered yet. I know there was just an earthquake, so I hope everyone's all right and your buildings are not moving around. And I'm just scrolling back up through the questions to make sure we didn't miss any. Deb asked one that I actually would love to hear if my fellow advocates have an answer to, if the budgets can be indexed to inflation. I know that's an ask from the RTA coalition. Maybe Laura, if you have an answer to that. I don't mean to volunteer you.
Sorry, I'm earthquake chatting. What was the question?
No, it's okay. How often on these Zoom calls do we have an earthquake rumbling? The question was from Deb Nam Crane, and she was asking if, the budgets can be indexed to inflation. I know that the cost of food has been
Yes.
a concern for.
Yes, yeah, that is definitely part of the ask. It's also in Rep. Blay and Senator Moran's RTA advancement bill that the budget be indexed to inflation. And there's some other things in there as well that we're asking for that Alexis didn't put in the slide, like $15 million for transit innovation grants that goes to funding things like microtransit pilots and fare-free buses. And there's like 3 different line items in addition to the 150 million. And so it's a really, I could put the link to the bill in the chat. It's a good bill, and it's a very solid budget request. And because the funds come from the fair share amendment and not, the normal tax revenues, they should be protected. That money is dedicated for transportation and education. And I've asked this question in, like, I don't know, maybe 10 meetings I've been in the last few weeks, and nobody has an answer. We know that budget revenues are projected to be much lower for the regular budget, but I haven't heard anything about fair share amendment revenues. Presumably people who are wealthy and getting taxed on that 1% are not affected by inflation in the same way that other people are. So I don't know if anybody has an answer to that. I would really love to hear if anybody has heard about the projected fair share amendment revenues.
I don't have a number in front of me, but I know for FY24, it was just about $1 billion, and now it's projected as a little bit over. And so the governor's budget was based off of that. So I could try to find the actual numbers, but I don't think it was like big enough to cover some of these unfortunate downturns in the revenue, but it definitely is a good picture. And that's for the school meals ask, because the fair share, for folks who aren't familiar, but has to go towards education and transportation. And so all of the governor's ask was completely out of fair share for school meals. Last year it was split between the general fund and fair share, and we're agnostic. We just want the money for the program, but it's certainly great to be able to pull from that progressive tax source if it's there.
I'll just add that at least earlier this week, the revenue picture was stopping its free fall and beginning to actually look a little bit brighter. What that looks like for the rest of the, this fiscal year cycle, hard to know. When the governor releases her House 1 in January, based on what they know in the last quarter of 2023, each time an iteration of the budget comes out, there's better information on how much the revenues are going to be as we get closer to the start of the next fiscal year, which is why sometimes you'll see different initiatives coming forward in the House and the Senate, both reflecting their priorities, but also reflecting the actual budget, the revenue picture at the time. So again, closer to the end of this fiscal year, they'll have a much better picture going forward. And so do whatever you do, light a candle, incense, a rain dance, to hope that the revenue picture improves as we get closer to on July 1st. I do want to note that the budget's done. In other words, the House Ways and Means has sent it to the printer. There's it's kind of like what's in it is in it. And Wednesday it will be officially released, and Friday the amendments will be due. And that's where you'll be hearing from a lot of groups about support this amendment or that amendment. But the opportunity to get something new in the budget has likely been decided.
Pat, you mean Wednesday is in next Wednesday, the
10th.
The 10th.
What's today? Yeah, the April 10th.
Yep. Sorry, I'm just making sure we get our dates in there because the dates are all running together for me.
So April 10th, the budget should be released sometime in the middle of the day. What's expected is that, sorry, I'm looking up at my calendar, April 12th is when amendments have to be filed. Sponsors have an opportunity to sign on, at least in the last couple sessions, anytime up until the amendment is actually taken up for deliberation. You said, correctly, it's probably about 1,000, 1,200 amendments likely to be filed. That's sort of what they do. There will be no activity the week of school vacation week, publicly, but staff and Ways and Means members and staff will be actively looking at all the amendments, starting to bucket them into certain categories. What we're hearing is the debate will likely start up on Wednesday or probably the 25th, which is Thursday, the 25th, and go to maybe 2 days. Maybe it'll start Wednesday. They're not starting earlier in the week because of the religious holidays, and they'll probably be done sometime on the 26th. So it's very squeezed in. And often amendments don't get taken up one by one, but they put into a whole big bucket called a consolidated amendment. And so you don't see votes on each amendment, is what I'm trying to say, usually.
That's doing a great job. Just basically going over the next steps that I was going to.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry. I'm
it's
sorry.
okay. Still great.
PowerPoint.
Because these
Okay.
are just confirming some of the dates. So that's wonderful. I know we have 10 minutes left, so I just want to get to a couple of the questions in the chat. Kamara asked a couple of questions about HIP. I guess I have a question about like what you mean by increasing utilization from either like the consumer or the farmer side. And like if you can clarify your questions, Kamara, if you want to come off mute, that's totally fine. But I can answer them in a general way if you prefer.
Yeah, real quickly, Becca. Specifically on the consumer side, I think the last time I saw HIP utilization rates for where I'm at in Pittsfield, it was like 1 or 2%. And then the second question is basically one strategy to try to increase that to allow different retailers to become certified to process HIP, specifically for like low food access communities, or whatever proxy can be used for low food access, if that's clarification.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just post really quickly in case folks don't know that DTA publishes a monthly fact sheet. So if you're hearing HIP utilization rates by county that some of us have referenced today, that's where that percentage comes from, is DTA's own data. And I'll just say that the uptake by the SNAP caseload in general continues to be low, and that's something that we try and advocate for full HIP funding to support more folks with SNAP benefits using HIP. That's why we're advocating for $25 million. And then, of course, making the program more accessible is a continuing ask of ours. DTA added new farmers to the program in 2020 and 2022. And I think that if we're going to make the case that we want more retailers added to the program, then we need to do a little bit of a check-in and see what kind of an impact that had, if those gaps in access, especially for SNAP recipients with disabilities and African-American SNAP recipients, were closed. And if not, like, where do those gaps still exist? So I would just say that like this is a yes, and we need to do a little bit of digging to figure out like how we back that ask up. Does that make sense? Cool. Leiron, I'm actually going to ask if you want to talk about your announcement now.
Sure. And it is a collective announcement for some of us on this call, but I just wanted to flag, many of you hopefully saw yesterday that the Make Hunger History Coalition has officially been launched. So this is a coalition that I think is probably a poorly kept secret, but was kind of started loosely after the White House conference in September of 2022. A number of the Massachusetts organizations that went to the conference got together and started talking about a plan for ending hunger here in Massachusetts, and really coming together as a number of different stakeholders from across different parts of the food system to really think about that plan. So Project Bread, we're serving as the backbone organization, but there's a robust steering committee really working on some of the details of the plan. And as now that we're public about the process, going to be engaging a number of other folks to make sure that different perspectives are included. We're working closely with the Council of Expertise we have at Project Bread and other people with lived experience, and really hoping to really incorporate all of that. So my ask for you is I'm going to put the website in the chat, and we're gathering people to join that coalition. So that will get you an invite to a monthly meeting and updates about what's going on. And as we get closer to actually having a written report asking for feedback on that report. And then our intention with Coalition is not just to put out a state plan, lots of other states have done that, but really then to think about implementation, how we make sure that we harness all the great advocacy energy we have in the state and all the different levers we have to then make sure that the coalition actually executes on that plan. So happy to answer questions on that in the chat, or I can also put my email, but I put the link to that website, and there's a link pretty prominently there for you to join the coalition. So thank you everyone for getting involved.
Can I ask a quick question, Becca?
Yeah.
So, Laurent, I'm curious if you have any organization in this core group that represents farmers, because oftentimes when we're in conversations about hunger, the first thought is how do we drop the price of food, which of course doesn't work for local farmers since they need to charge what they need to charge so they can keep farming. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so I don't have every group that's involved in front of me, but on the steering committee, we do have the Food Systems Collaborative. And I know in some of the stakeholder meetings we've had, we're working with a consultant. Agriculture is very well represented in those stakeholder interviews. But I would certainly love for your organization, other organizations to join the coalition. So as we continue to move forward, but we continue to have that prominent
Thank you.
within the solutions. Yeah, and I hear you, and I think that if we think about any way to reduce, it can't come at the expense of farmers and the local agriculture system.
And I would just agree with that because according to the recent US Census of Agriculture that was in 2022, Massachusetts farmers make 95 cents for every $1 they put into production. So that's pretty not typical for American agriculture, and that's something that the collaborative is working to, reverse, and is just a key back of the mind fact for us. Laron, do you want to answer Callie's question before I turn to a different question?
Yeah, so Callie was asking if like a lot of the coalitions represented here and elsewhere are going to be folded into this Make Hunger History Coalition. We're really looking at something called collective impact, which is like a fancy term for really great collaboration. So a lot of the big coalitions that you heard from today are represented on the steering committee. But the idea is that every organization is still going to do what they're going to do. The coalitions are still going to do what they're going to do, but really to think how can we try to increase our collective support for one another? How do we maybe as a collective think about some prioritization? So maybe the Make Hunger History Coalition will lift up certain things at certain times. But if you're interested in a particular topic, those coalitions will still exist. I certainly encourage you to get involved with those coalitions. But if you're interested in kind of a big tent, really thinking about how all these pieces come together, that's where the Make Hunger History Coalition will work.
Thank you. It's really exciting, so I definitely recommend folks signing up. And I did just see a question about the omnibus bills that I wanted to answer when we have still a few minutes left. I think some of you know that for the first time this session, the legislature created a joint committee on agriculture. Previously, agriculture had been part of a larger committee that dealt with environment and natural resources as well. That committee has done something a little unusual where they released two omnibus bills, one House 4387 and one Senate 2570. The collaborative has a number of priorities in those omnibus bills. We would love to see them passed. The House bill is a little bit larger and includes some priorities from Farm Bureau, CMAP, I believe, with the Deer Overpopulation Commission, and a couple of other organizations. I'll post a link to our priorities that's on our website now, but I think that we're going to need to do some work, and we'll be asking folks to do some advocacy around those pretty soon. I know that it's not super great timing with everything going on in the budget, but we, while we have asks in front of Ways and Means, it's good to include these bills as well. So I'll just send those out in the follow-up. All right. And with 2 minutes left, I will just say that as Pat wonderfully illustrated, the process is going to heat up in the next couple of weeks. So definitely keep an eye out for calls to action, requests to either write an email to your state representatives or to call into the State House. I know for the HIP campaign, we'll be having a virtual call-in day for folks who were unable to make lobby day last week. So keep an eye on your inbox for those, and then we will send out the slides, the notes, and the recording. So if there's anyone that you want to get in touch with, their contact information will be in those slides. And I think folks have done a really good job at putting their contact information in the chat. So just wanted to say thank you to all of my co-presenters for their time and effort, and for you all too, coming to this when you, I'm sure, had a very busy Friday. So thanks everyone, and hope you have a great rest of your.
I could just add, don't get discouraged. Something may not get into the House budget. It will get in the Senate, and there's horse trading that goes on. Do not get discouraged because your issue doesn't get enough funding, or you don't get an amendment through it. We don't have the luxury of getting discouraged. So just keep fighting on this. Amazing things do happen, and particularly when we join together. So just wanted to end on that note.
Organizing works. So
yeah,
keep up. Appreciate it. All right. Have a great weekend, everyone.